My sister publicly called me a joke at her wedding. You're just a failed artist. She laughed. I said nothing, just gave her my gift. A week later, she called me crying when My sister stood beneath a canopy of orchids and fairy lights, her champagne glass catching reflections of the gold-lit ballroom. Everyone was watching her, Amanda, the golden child, the high achiever, the woman who never made a misstep in her life, not in our parents' eyes. And then, in front of 200 guests, she smiled that dazzling, television-ready smile and said into the mic, "And here's to my big brother, our family's very own starving artist. Still chasing those failed dreams, huh?" Laughter rippled through the room like a champagne spill on silk. Casual. Unkind. But not unexpected. I stood there near the edge of the dance floor, invisible in a rented black suit that didn't quite fit. I didn't react. Not because it didn't hurt, but because hurt had become something I carried quietly, like the sketchbook always tucked under my arm. People laughed, maybe out of politeness, maybe because they were used to laughing at me when she told the joke first. I felt it though. All of it. Each chuckle a pinprick under the skin. Amanda went on unfazed. "At least he's consistent, right? Still sketching in cafes and living the bohemian dream. We love you for it." Her grin said otherwise. I stared at the half-eaten cake on my plate. My throat tightened. I said nothing. You learn that trick when you're the black sheep. You survive by folding into yourself. I'd survived years of family gatherings where my accomplishments, what few there were met with awkward silences or vague nods. Where Amanda's every promotion was toasted, and I was left defending why I still rented a one-bedroom studio downtown. But I didn't come here to fight. I came with a gift. A painting, wrapped in ivory paper and tied with a black silk ribbon. She hadn't opened it yet. She wouldn't until the night wound down and the dancing was over and the buzz had faded. And when she did, when her nails tore through the paper and the canvas emerged, she'd see. That night, I didn't give a speech. I didn't raise a glass. I simply walked up to her after her performance, handed her the gift, still without saying a word, and left before the first dance even started. I still remember the look in her eyes when I placed the box in her hands. Confused. Curious. Not suspicious. Not yet. She had no idea. And neither did the maid of honor standing behind her, trying too hard not to meet my gaze. 3 weeks before the wedding, I was at Amanda's place to drop off a custom frame she wanted for the engagement photo her fiancé Kevin had blown up to the size of a movie poster. She insisted it be gallery-worthy. And as much as I hated the idea of my art skills being reduced to wedding decor, I said yes. Like I always did. The house was quiet when I got there. Amanda had left in a rush, some brunch thing with her college friends, and Kevin, she said, was working from home. I let myself in with the spare key she always left under the ridiculous frog statue by the porch. The plan was to leave the frame on the kitchen island, shoot her a text, and be out before anyone noticed. But then I heard voices. Soft at first. Then laughter. From upstairs. I paused near the bottom of the staircase, thinking maybe Kevin was on a video call. He worked in marketing, maybe it was one of those casual meetings. But something made me stop. I couldn't hear his voice clearly, but the laugh that followed didn't come from a Zoom window. It was feminine. Familiar. I didn't mean to sneak. I didn't mean to listen. But once I heard that voice, Caroline's voice, Amanda's best friend and maid of honor, I froze. "She's so clueless," Caroline said through a breathy laugh. Kevin mumbled something back. Then a pause. Then a sound I wish I could forget. The creak of the bed frame. The kind of silence that screamed. The kind of silence that follows two people colliding with a history of secrecy. I stood there, unmoving, one hand braced against the stairwell. I should have stormed in. I should have called Amanda, told her everything, ripped the mask off right then and there. But I didn't. Instead, I walked out. Quietly. Carefully. Like a ghost. I went back to my apartment and didn't sleep that night. The city outside my window never shuts up, but that night it was like the noise had turned in on me. Every honk, Every footstep outside, every bit of sound made the truth ring louder. Kevin was cheating on my sister. And not just with anyone, with Caroline, the one person Amanda trusted most outside of family. The next morning, I started the painting. I didn't sketch it out first. I just began. It wasn't just about betrayal. It was about truth. About the things people refuse to see, even when it's right in front of them. I painted from memory. Kevin's hand on Caroline's hip, the delicate intimacy of their posture, the unmistakable curve of her smile pressed against his neck. No faces. Just enough detail. Enough suggestion. Enough truth that anyone who looked at it would know. It wasn't meant to be cruel. It was meant to be seen. The painting took me 12 nights. It wasn't just brushstrokes and color. It was memory. It was rage. It was restraint. Every hour I worked on it, I told myself I was doing this for Amanda. That she deserved to know. That no matter how deep the rift between us, no one deserved a lie that heavy on their wedding day. But it wasn't that simple. Because part of me didn't want to save her. I wanted her to feel what I felt standing in that ballroom, small, laughed at, discarded. I wanted her to know what it meant to be on the outside looking in, watching people toast your humiliation with champagne and polite applause. I didn't want to destroy her wedding. I wanted her to understand. But every time I picked up the brush, I hesitated. I imagined her face when she saw it. Not the anger. Not the denial. The pain. The moment she realized the man she thought would love her forever had been loving someone else all along. Someone she trusted. Someone she called sister. I nearly scrapped the whole thing. Twice. Once, I even wrapped it in brown paper and hid it in my closet like a secret I wanted to forget. I stared at it for hours, trying to decide, was this revenge, or was it a gift? I kept flashing back to when we were kids. Before things got twisted. When she used to sneak into my room and watch me draw under the covers with a flashlight, whispering, "Make me a mermaid next." When she begged me to illustrate her diary because she said I made stories look real. That version of Amanda, the one with tangled curls and grass stains on her knees, she would have never laughed at me in front of 200 people. But that version of Amanda didn't exist anymore. The week before the wedding, I made my decision. I took the painting to the framer. I chose an expensive oak finish, one with texture and weight. I had them wrap it in thick cream paper, double-taped at the corners, and tied with a black ribbon. It looked elegant. Almost regal. No one would guess what lived inside it. And then I wrote the card. 5 words. For your forever memory. See. That was it. I didn't need to say anything else. The painting would do the rest. The morning of the wedding was overcast, like the sky knew what was coming. I arrived at the venue exactly 15 minutes before the ceremony, early enough not to be rude, late enough to avoid small talk. I wasn't in the mood to pretend. Not today. Not with the painting in the back seat of my car, taunting me with its presence. The gift table was a shrine to opulence. Crystal card boxes, designer-wrapped packages, envelopes fat with checks. I waited until no one was looking and slid mine near the back, standing upright. It looked unassuming there, just another generous gesture in a sea of obligatory ones. Amanda didn't see me until the reception. She looked like a fairy tale version of herself, lace sleeves, swept-up hair, eyes rimmed in gold shimmer. Beautiful. Radiant. Untouchable. And then she gave that speech. The one where she made me into a punchline. The words weren't even new. She'd used variations of them before, during dinners, birthdays, even once at a job interview mixer she dragged me to because she needed a +1. My brother the starving artist, she'd say, laughing like it was a badge of quirky honor. But this time she said it with teeth. The laughter that followed came too easily. Too many people, too many eyes. I didn't even flinch. Just smiled softly, as if I'd heard a different joke. My hands were calm, steady. When the speech ended, and the music began again, I walked toward her. She was radiant, flushed with champagne and praise, accepting hugs from people who'd forget her name by Monday. She barely noticed me until I was a foot away. Hey, I said, quiet. Oh. She blinked, startled. You're still here. I didn't answer that. Instead, I pulled the wrapped painting from behind my back and held it out. She took it automatically, distracted. For you, I said. Her fingers found the ribbon. I turned and walked away before she could undo it. I didn't stay for the first dance. I didn't stay for cake. I didn't stay for the moment the music died and the quiet fell and someone finally asked, Hey, what did your brother give you? I was already halfway home by then. I don't know who unwrapped it first, Amanda, Kevin, maybe even Caroline. Doesn't really matter. What matters is that it happened in the bridal suite, sometime between the champagne toasts and the sparkler send-off, surrounded by Amanda's closest circle. The people she trusted most. It started with a laugh, I was told later. Amanda assumed it was one of my abstract things. Probably a metaphor for loneliness or hunger. She had joked, her tone smug. She expected something pretentious, maybe a watercolor of an empty chair or a faceless bride on a cliff. But then the paper fell away. And the room went quiet. At first, no one spoke. That's what I heard from a groomsman who saw it secondhand, said he was walking past the suite and heard nothing. Just a stillness that felt off. Then came Amanda's voice. Not a scream. Not a sob. Just a stunned, breathless. What is this? Kevin went pale, apparently. Caroline froze. The painting didn't need a caption. The curve of her neck. The unmistakable tension in his hands. Their bodies, wrapped in a moment only the three of us should have known about. I hadn't painted it pornographic. This wasn't scandal for the sake of scandal. It was raw. Emotional. Honest. There was grief in it, whether they noticed or not. Because I hadn't painted it out of spite. I had painted what was true. The silence gave way to chaos. Voices overlapping. Accusations. Deflections. Someone knocked over a table. Someone cried. Amanda, I'm told, stared at it long after Kevin left the room. Long after Caroline locked herself in the bathroom. Long after the bridal party realized this wasn't just a prank or a misunderstanding. It was proof. I didn't see it happen. But I imagined it perfectly, her hands trembling, ribbons still dangling from the edge of the frame, her future unraveling with every second she stared at those brushstrokes. It was the most honest conversation we'd ever had. And I didn't say a single word. It was exactly 7 days after the wedding when my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. I didn't need to see the name. The timing told me everything. I'd been waiting for this, not eagerly, not vindicatively, but with a strange stillness. Like waiting for thunder after seeing lightning. You know it's coming. You just don't know how loud it'll be. The third time, I picked up. I didn't say anything. Just pressed the phone to my ear and listened. See, Cameron. Her voice cracked halfway through my name. There was static. And then a sound I hadn't heard since we were kids. She was crying. Not performative tears. Not the kind she'd fake to get out of trouble when we were younger. These were the kind that came from the gut, where breathing turns ragged and words disintegrate before they reach the mouth. She tried again. I didn't know who else to call. I stayed quiet. You knew, she whispered. You knew, and you still came to the wedding. My voice was flat. You made me your joke. I didn't know, she said, and I could hear her moving, pacing, probably, the way she always did when she was unraveling. I didn't know I thought she was my friend. You didn't know, I repeated. Silence. Then softly. How long have you known? 3 weeks before the wedding. Another pause. Why didn't you tell me? I could hear it in her voice, the mix of betrayal and shame, like she wasn't sure which part hurt more. The affair or that I hadn't warned her before letting her walk into the fire. I tried, I said. With the painting. She let out a shaky breath. Everyone saw it. Mom. Dad. The bridal party. I opened it in front of Caroline. I pictured the moment. Caroline's face draining of color. The realization. The flood of silence before the denials set in. He ran out, she said. Kevin. He didn't even fight. Just left. And her? She lied. For about 10 seconds. Then she didn't. Her breath caught. Everything exploded. It's over. All of it. And then came the real confession. I deserved it. I didn't reply. She kept going. I've been awful to you. For years. I know that. I thought I was protecting you, or being funny, or just pushing you to be tougher. But I was cruel. And I made you feel small. More static. I made you feel the way Kevin just made me feel. And just like that, the phone became heavy in my hand. Because part of me, maybe a big part, wanted to forgive her. But part of me wasn't ready. After she hung up, I sat there staring at the wall, phone still in hand, like maybe the silence would tell me what to feel. I thought I'd feel relief. Or pride. Or some twisted sense of justice. But all I felt was tired. I'd spent a lifetime being the shadow in the corner of family photos, the afterthought at birthdays, the punchline at reunions. I thought that by painting the truth, by wrapping it in ribbon and handing it back to her, I was reclaiming something. And in a way, I did. But it didn't feel like power. It felt like grief. I didn't hear from Amanda again for 3 days. When she finally texted, it was a single sentence. I moved out of the condo. Staying at Mom and Dad's for now. Thank you for telling me, even if it broke me. That was all. I didn't reply. Not because I wanted to hurt her, but because I didn't know how to answer. What do you say to the person who lit your self-worth on fire for half your life, and then called you crying from the ashes of her own? I thought back to when we were kids, and I used to draw her as a superhero. Amanda the brave. Amanda the invincible. I used to believe in her like some kids believed in God. Maybe that was the problem. She always saw herself in the spotlight. And me? I lived behind the canvas. But now, she had no audience left. The wedding was called a farce by half the guests. Her social media had gone silent. Caroline had vanished. Kevin, too. And the painting? She hadn't returned it. She hadn't destroyed it either. According to someone on the bridal team, she had it propped in her old childhood bedroom, facing the wall, like it was waiting. Like a mirror she wasn't ready to face again. When Amanda moved back in with our parents, the whispers started. Our mother tried to keep it contained, something about a misunderstanding, or cold feet, but the truth had already leaked through the cracks. Weddings don't fall apart in silence. Especially not ones that cost nearly $60,000 and end in tears and a vanished groom. It didn't take long before Mom called me. Her voice was sharp, clipped, like she'd rehearsed her tone before dialing. I think we should all have dinner. As a family. I nearly laughed. The last time we were all at a table, Amanda was making jokes about my career like I was some hobbyist with a paintbrush and a pipe dream. Now she wanted to pass mashed potatoes like nothing had happened? Still, I said yes. Not for her. But because part of me needed to know how deep the damage ran, and whether anyone else had finally seen what I'd been carrying for years. The night of the dinner, I arrived on time. Amanda was already there, sitting at the far end of the table. No makeup. Hair pulled into a messy bun. Not the curated version of her that the world knew, but the real Amanda. Raw. Quiet. My parents were in the kitchen, bickering about whether the roast had dried out. It all felt too normal. Too easy to forget. Dinner started awkwardly. Small talk about the weather. A half-hearted compliment about the salad. Amanda didn't say much. Neither did I. But every now and then, I'd catch her eyes flicking to mine. Then our mother cleared her throat. I just want to say, I think it's time we move on. Amanda tensed. I stayed silent. What happened? She continued. Was horrible. But it's over now. We're a family. We forgive. We move forward. She looked at Amanda. Then at me. Don't you agree? That's when I realized she didn't understand. Or maybe she didn't want to. To her, This was just another drama to sweep under the rug. Another family episode to fast forward through. But Amanda finally spoke. "No, Mom," she said, voice low. "We don't just move on." Our father raised an eyebrow. "Sweetheart, no one's blaming you. It's not your fault." Amanda stared at her plate. "It kind of is." She looked up, eyes glassy, voice steady. "I hurt him. For years. Made him feel like less. And he still showed me the truth when no one else would have. He gave me the truth in the only language he had left." They all looked at me then. My mother blinked. "Truth? You mean that painting? That thing was art," Amanda interrupted. "It was art. And it saved me." The table went silent. For the first time in, maybe ever, Amanda had put herself second. I didn't say anything right away. I just sat there, slowly letting the air fill my lungs like I hadn't done it in years. There was no applause. No dramatic music. But something shifted. Amanda didn't owe me perfection. I didn't need her to be broken. I just needed her to see me. And she had. Maybe not before the wedding. Maybe not in time to save herself from the fallout. But now, in that small dining room, with the scent of burnt roast and uncomfortable silence hanging thick in the air, now she saw me. That was enough. For the first time, I reached for her hand across the table. She didn't flinch. A week after the dinner, I stepped back into my studio. It felt different this time. Not just because the painting, was gone, or because the silence in the room now felt peaceful instead of heavy. It was something subtler. Like the air had cleared after a long, suffocating storm. The easel still sat in the corner, a smear of dried oils staining its wood. The tarp on the floor was stiff with old pigment. My brushes, rinsed but tired, waited in a jar like soldiers after war. For the first few minutes, I just stood there. No music. No coffee. Just the sound of the city drifting in through the cracked window, life going on. That's when I realized, for the first time in years, I had no rage to paint. No betrayal to dissect. No fire to smother onto canvas in desperate layers. It was unsettling. But also, freeing. I opened my sketchbook. Not to revisit the past, not to capture someone's worst moment, but to start something new. Something honest. Gentle, even. The first stroke was hesitant. A soft charcoal curve. Amanda's hand? Not the Amanda at the wedding. Not the Amanda in designer heels and biting comments. The Amanda I remembered from childhood, barefoot in our backyard, tracing flowers in dirt, the first person who ever asked me to draw something just for her. I didn't know what the piece would become. But I knew this, it wouldn't be revenge. It would be memory. Not to glorify. Not to forgive blindly. But to understand. Art had always been my voice. For years I used it to scream silently into rooms where no one listened. To paint the things no one would let me say out loud. But now it could be more than a weapon. It could be a bridge. That night, as the city blinked its lights back at me through the window, I kept drawing. Lines became shapes. Shapes became warmth. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't just painting against something, but towards something. Not closure. But maybe healing.